All right, welcome back to the Yoga Chat. I'm your host, Montana,
I am your host, May.
and our guest today. Well, before we announce our guest, we keep forgetting to do this, and my mom is actually sad. So, hi, mom. We started saying hi, mom, in the beginning, and my mom still listens. She's like, "Why'd you stop saying hi to me?" I'm like, "Because there's other people listening. It's not just you anymore, mom." But hello.
Hi,
Um,
Mom. Hi,
and
Aaron.
hi, Erin. Yeah, May's sister. Because May's mom doesn't listen yet. But anyways, I'm so excited to have on. You're gonna have to tell me how to pronounce your last name, Stacey.
I
Actually, I
can
guess
do
May,
it.
you can say it. Yeah,
Stacey Vespaziani.
Vespaziani. So Stacey has been practicing yoga since 2001. She is from Pittsburgh, still living in Pittsburgh. And her fun fact is that she has a background in a college degree in theater. So welcome, Stacey. So happy to have you.
Hi, thank you so much. Glad to be here.
How are you doing today?
Real quick, another fun fact
Yeah.
about Stacey is that she grew up across the street from my husband.
This is so true,
What?
actually.
Yeah.
Eddie and I rode the school bus together. My brother well, Eddie's brother is the godfather to my niece. So yeah, lots of Pittsburgh, 0 degrees of separation.
That's not something that I knew. That's amazing.
Surprise. The
Yes.
fun fact of the day.
So before we get started, May, do you want to tell everyone how you know Stacey?
I do. Well, besides just South Hills Power Yoga being the very first place I ever really found as my yoga home in Pittsburgh, um, Stacey was the leader of my 200-hour yoga teacher training. And I believe from Instagram and from seeing this stuff, because I still teach at South Hills Power once a week on Mondays, that they are running another yoga teacher training, another 200-hour coming up soon. So we could talk about that a little later, but I would highly recommend it. And Montana would as well, because half the teachers that work at Yoga 6 went through the 200-hour at South Hills Power, and we're all pretty awesome. So Stacey, thank you for making us good yoga teachers. So yeah, and we've talked about in this podcast, you, Darcy, Jen Lee, everybody we've interviewed that's a Pittsburgh yoga person, um, thinks of South Hills Power in the same way that I do, which is just it's where they found yoga, it's where they found the teachers that they connected with and that they kept wanting to go back to. So it's kind of like a mainstay. And if you're a Pittsburgh person who does yoga, you know of South Hills Power and you're connected to it in some way. So I'm so glad that you came on because so many people have spoken very highly of you and that space. So it's good that you're here.
Yeah,
Long
thanks for
time
having
coming.
me. Excited.
Fun fact too, I used to take at South Hills Power Yoga. I haven't been in years just because my schedule's crazy, but I was actually South Hills Power Yoga was the first teacher training that I looked into, and the only reason that I didn't do it and started looking for other studios was because it didn't work in my schedule at the time. And then I took a class at Yoga Flow, and it worked in my schedule, and that's literally why I chose Yoga Flow for South Hills Power Yoga because it worked better in my schedule. So, yeah, I echo everything that May says. I love all of the teachers that you train and support, and we're very lucky, all of us in Pittsburgh, to have your studio and your community. And I'm excited about this conversation.
Yeah, thanks. I think we're really lucky in Pittsburgh. I mean, I love how many studios and communities and trainings are out there. And it's like, one will fit in your schedule or one's the right vibe in a
Mhm.
moment. And I just love that because there was a time where there weren't a lot of options, and now there are. And I think that speaks to, just the growing interest in yoga in general. And also, people take it and run. And that's my most rewarding thing about being a teacher of teachers is you get to look around and be like, wow, look at what everyone's up to, right? So pretty cool.
That gives me
Very cool.
goosebumps. Yeah.
Me too.
So the first question we always ask everyone, Stacey, what is your zodiac sign?
Oh, do you want everything like rising?
Yes.
Yes, if you know,
I'm a
yes.
Libra sun. I'm a Capricorn rising, and I am an Aquarius moon.
I'm an Aquarius moon.
Wow.
This is why we get along, right?
I don't think we've had any Libras on here yet. You might be
Oh,
the first.
well,
A
I
lot of
am
Leos.
so glad to be your first Libra.
Yes.
Libra.
Bringing the balance here, right?
When's your brother? I mean, when's your birthday? My brother's a
October
Libra.
17th.
17th. Cool. My brother's a Libra. Actually, both of them are. Well, I know Landon is. He's the 15th, so he's close to you. I love Libras. They're so put together.
Fun
Well,
fact about Ed that I just realized doing Ed's birth chart. Ed's a triple Capricorn, and it makes a whole lot of sense because he's like the most stable individual I've ever met in my entire life. He's got that rock energy that balances out my Aquarius, Scorpio, Gemini chaos.
yeah, that's a lot going
And
on.
I was like, I've never met anyone that's triple anything, and you're triple Capricorn. Like, holy
Wow.
shit.
Yeah.
We are meant for each
Steady,
other.
steady as you go.
So awesome. Why don't we just dive into, Stacey, will you let us, myself know, and the listeners, just a little bit of your background and where you come from and what led you to where you are now, where it all started?
Sure. I didn't take my first yoga class till I was in college. And I said in the intake form, 2001, that's my best guesstimate. It was somewhere either my junior or senior year of college. But I went to school for theater, and part of our movement program was you had to take a section of yoga. And I was so adamant that yoga was ridiculous and not going to be something I liked that I waited till like the last semester I could take it. And I can't remember exactly where that fell. And my best friend, who's still my best friend today, we were living together at the time, and I'd be like hungover eating pizza at our kitchen table, and she'd be doing yoga in the morning and be like, "Oh my gosh, if you want like a workout, go run," you know? and and I just like wanted nothing to do with it, which tracks. Maybe this is my Aquarius moon, but like most of the things that have turned out to be really good for me, I've resisted hardcore. And yoga was one of them. But I got into that first yoga class, and it was a hatha yoga class. The man who was the chair of the opera department in the conservatory I went to was got certified over the summer and started teaching this class. And it blew my mind. I mean, the thing that I was drawn to most was the stillness, which, especially at that time in my life, was what I didn't have a lot of. So that first Shavasana, I was just kind of like, I don't know what happened, but I want it again.
Totally.
Um,
Where did you go to school?
I went to school at the University of Cincinnati, the conservatory there. It's called CCM, College Conservatory of Music. I'm not a musician or a singer, but there was a drama program within that umbrella.
Cool. So sorry, I cut you off, but continue. So what happened after school?
Yeah, so I at that point, wanted to be a famous actress and playwright, and ended up like thinking I was gonna move to New York, and some things happened and I didn't, and I stayed in Cincinnati a little longer. And then we moved back to Pittsburgh after I got married pretty young at 22. We moved back to Pittsburgh, and I wanted to find I got into spinning too. So I was trying to find a yoga class where there was spinning and yoga like that I could take back to back. And I walked into this class at a local gym and met the woman who would end up like changing my life in the yoga world. Her name's Darcy Lyle. I think you had mentioned her. I walked into her class. At the time, she had these dreads, and I took her class, and I'd never taken power yoga before. And after that class, I went up to her and I was like, "Hi, my name is Stacey, and we're gonna be friends." And she's like, "Whoa," And she was teaching at a yoga studio locally, and invited me to that class. And it was a heated studio. And again, I resisted, like, that heated studio stuff sounds crazy, but ended up eventually going and really liking it and doing my first 200-hour training there. And then through that training got into the Baptiste yoga training, where I continued and ended up getting my 500 hours. Then I knew I wanted to teach in the community level, and started a Pay What You Can class at the Union Project, which also turned into a Pay What You Can class at the Dormont Library. I was teaching at studios at that time as well. And then my day job became less and less what I wanted to focus on, and yoga became more and more. And at some point I went full-time yoga. And a few years after that, ended up opening the studio here in Dormont.
We've talked to about, I think, 23, 24 people now, and I think at least 6 of them brought up Darcy as one of the first people that connected them to yoga. Um, and we've been talking about getting Darcy on here because she doesn't listen. She probably doesn't even know this exists, but I would love to reach out to her and be like, hey, there are a lot of people that you have literally changed the trajectory of their yoga like journey because um the story's always the same. They walk into her class and they're like, I don't know what that was, but I want to do it again. And I felt the same way when I took her class. And we're going to need to tap into her brain and figure out what she did to make us all get
Yeah.
hooked. But I
It's
had
Because
no
like
idea that
everything, right? It's
Darcy was
it's
the
the
one.
right person at the right time. And
yeah,
I think that when I met Darcy, she was teaching at a local gym, not a studio. And I think,
Hmm.
I try to remind people, especially people who do our teacher training, that in order to do this work, it can be really low key. And that's actually where you're going to, like, it doesn't have to be in a studio, it can be in a community center, it can be in a gym. And that's where you're going to probably meet people who otherwise might not take a yoga class at a studio.
Yeah.
I think that Darcy and other people at that time, I mean, this was 15 plus years ago, you know, teaching in these more accessible places, I think really planted seeds for people on, what yoga could be or what direction to kind of take. I mean, personally, my practice. So,
Right.
totally.
So what studio was it that you went through your 200 hour? Was it was here in Pittsburgh?
yeah, amazing yoga.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow. Cool. It's all connected.
The dots are
Amazing yoga
connecting.
too. Yeah, amazing yoga is also a Pittsburgh staple. Um, I would love to reach out to, some of the teachers. I used to practice there as well. When I was in college, I just like hopped around to whatever was available and accessible. But there
I
really
like
are
to
some,
say, love yoga will travel, right?
yeah, exactly. 100%. Uh, I also just remembered,
Also,
go ahead.
sorry, you two have a lot in common because you both were in the dance, theater, creative, performing arts world and thought you would end up in New York. And both of you ended up in Pittsburgh living the yoga life. So I didn't realize that you two kind of had that in common.
When Stacey was sharing that, I was like, am I looking in a mirror? But the only difference is I came to school to Pittsburgh from Texas, and same thing. I thought I was going to New York, and right before, I don't know exactly when it started happening, but when I actually started accepting the fact that my life was going a different direction, I decided to stay in Pittsburgh, and I've been here for over a decade now, which is so weird to say. But also, I was just talking about this with a friend who's actually been on the podcast before, Catherine Gignac. We bring her up a lot.
What?
And
Yeah.
yeah, she's amazing. Also, got trained in amazing yoga. Um, so we were talking about that just last night. Like, there's no way we can leave Pittsburgh. Like, this place is just, it's special. It's underrated, especially me not being from here. My friends and family who haven't visited are like, Pittsburgh? Why? That's so random. And even when I came to school, my friends were like, Pennsylvania, where is that? And I was like, I don't know. I literally don't know, but I'm going to this school in downtown Pittsburgh. And then when I stayed, everyone's like, why? And I'm like, come visit and you'll see why. And lo and behold, every single time they're like, this place is different. I'm like, I know. And nobody can really pinpoint what it is. I always say, I love the people. Yinzers are just my favorite. I married one. And I also, people laugh at me, but I love the weather because it exists. Like there actually is weather. And there's not weather in Texas where I come from. So like the fall, even this Sunday, May and I were at an event. Actually, Catherine was teaching at the Maverick Hotel. So we were taking her class and it started flurrying like during class. It felt like we were in a snow globe. And I looked at my friend Nicole next to me and I was like, every time it snows, I'm still a little girl in Texas. Like, I'm so excited. Look at the snow. And she's like, oh my God. It's
Meanwhile,
just,
I'm like, ugh, is this
yeah.
over yet?
I was like, it's
I'm done.
magic.
Um, okay, sorry, back to yoga because I really want to talk
Me.
about the Baptiste training. I
Yes.
mean, but because I love obviously I went through your training and it's based on a Baptiste, power yoga training. So what you got your 200-hour amazing yoga, what drew you to the Baptiste yoga? Like how did you find it? And didn't you actually go travel and, study with him?
I did. Yeah. I mean, that initial training that I did was at the time I believe, affiliated with Baptiste and was my teachers. And so when I had the opportunity to go and study directly with Barron and through the Baptiste Institute at that time in my life, it just seemed like absolutely the next thing I wanted to do. And I've really met people from all over the world through that community at that time in my life, and it built the foundation of how I approach teaching a vinyasa or power class.
Did that when you went through that training, I'm curious because the way you led your training with us, I remember you placed a lot of importance on the accessibility of, making yoga accessible to all in many different ways. Did Baptiste have that attitude towards yoga as well? Like with accessibility? Because his is kind of like a kick butt, we read Journey to Power, and in it he talks about like the way you can transform your body, and I just feel like the way you approach yoga is a little bit different than that. So like how did you what did you get from that training and how did you turn it into what you do now?
Well, I think all of my teachers, some I formally, studied with, and some I don't even maybe know their names because I've taken their class. Like I consider so much of, this like picking up of tools over
Mhm.
the years. But I mean, something I've always been interested in is how do you take what you do and make it available to the most amount of people? What in all the different things in theater, in yoga, in writing. It's just something I guess I've always been curious about. Maybe that's the Libra in me trying to balance everything. Um, but what I love about being a yoga teacher is that you get to pull from all of these different sources, and then it funnels through who you are at the moment. So who I was when I started the studio almost 13 years ago is different. It's a different woman than I am today. And in the last couple of years, I did a teacher training through Accessible Yoga with Jivana Heyman. That has informed who I am today as a teacher. I did a social justice and yoga training with Michelle Cassandra Johnson. That has informed who I am as a yoga teacher and person today. So I don't know. I think like it's like the one domino you start and it just keeps going.
Mhm.
Uh, I love that who I was as a practitioner and a teacher yesterday does not have to be who I am today because I have this next day of knowledge, right?
That's
Yeah, you
something
guys, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that's something I feel like I've been really presented a lot recently and stepping into and remembering that like all teachers have teachers and we are just products of those things that we've been granted access to. And like you said, it's tools. So I'm really starting to understand too that like tools don't necessarily have to be like take it or leave it, but it's like put this tool in your toolbox and when it feels like it's time to use it, you have it there, right? But you never have to like actually let go of something in order to gain something else. It's just the progress of progression, of growth.
Yeah,
What
I
were you
mean,
gonna say?
artists are my teachers,
Yeah.
poets are my teachers. It's who what I'm taking in from all the different areas is what comes out, in when I'm standing there having something to offer, or when I'm on my mat and like, moving through the thing of life. So um yeah, it's exciting to me that it to me is very dynamic. And I'm so grateful for like the foundation of my teaching and that I found a style of yoga that like so spoke to me at that moment. And then since then have been able to like add things in and edit things out as appropriate to the moment.
Yeah. And coming from an artist background as well, do you consider the path that you've taken a path from theater, like of an artist?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It sounds like maybe I'm putting clues together. You went to Point Park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
also a conservatory type atmosphere, right? And so,
Yeah.
I mean, what I got my BFA in does not look like I didn't take one math class. I didn't take one science class, right? Like we rolled around on the floor and did monologues from weird positions and like learned how to ballroom dance and learned how to project my voice, learned how to like stand up and hold space.
Mhm.
And I guess there's a lot of different things I could have done with that, but it was a great compliment to leading a room in movement, right? And
Yeah.
the tools that I think that I have been able to translate into our teacher training as well. Um, and I mean, sometimes even in our teacher training, I don't call it that, but I mean, we'll even do theater games, just to help people learn how to project and to open up and to like be in the moment. So yeah, of course it informs and continues to inform how I show up as a teacher, as a practitioner, as a person.
Something I've heard that you do in your teacher training is you have your trainees in the very beginning teach something that they know how to do. Is that a theater game?
No, that was just, I get really excited. I mean, I don't know. I love teaching teachers. I love teaching things I'm passionate about. So
Mhm.
like that was one of the very early ideas that just kind of came to me and has stayed through in the curriculum of the training. So
People talk
I
about it.
liked that game. Yeah, people do talk about it, and I remember mostly everyone's thing. The one I remember a lot was Tyler. I'm sure you remember Tyler. He runs the tub club now. He does like ice bath, sauna, breath work stuff. We had him on a couple episodes back, but he taught how to ripen an avocado and keep it ripe longer. And I literally think about him once a week when I'm at the grocery store because I get so much more value out of my avocados now. Hi Tyler, Tyler, thank you again if you're listening. I've already told you this, but I still think about the avocado lesson. You're supposed to get them unripe, put them with fruit in a bowl until they're ripe, and then put them immediately in the refrigerator, and then they last the longest, in case anyone was wondering.
that's great. And I appreciate you like also passing that on, right? Like, because this
Yeah.
teaching is, yeah, yeah. And that particular exercise is we're all teachers, whether we know
Mhm.
it or not. I mean, people learn from us. I want to be putting out there the kind of like way of being that I want to be in the world, right? So like it's nice to be mindful of it and be like, oh, I actually already am a teacher in these ways. And so let's start our training from there, right?
Love that. I didn't realize that that was the idea behind it, but I love that. When you so this is the training that you have coming up. Is this the first one you're running since the 2020 virtual training that we were in?
That, yes, I mean, of course, we didn't know the 2020 training was going to turn
Right.
into virtual training,
Right. Yes.
nor had we
You
had
guys
any
really
experience on how to
yeah.
run a virtual anything. But yeah, this is the first time that we're offering a training since then. And just excited to be opening up to that possibility again. And then I think we'll probably be doing one in either fall, late fall, winter of 2024, or right at the beginning of 2025 is kind of what I'm thinking next. So
Okay.
That's so exciting.
Well, it's super exciting. And if anybody's listening and you're even thinking about becoming a yoga teacher, I would highly recommend looking into the South Hills Powers program just because I always talk about this, but because Montana and I we run a 200-hour teacher training through Yoga 6. Montana has a 500-hour, so she's the facilitator and I'm her assistant, and I'm going to be getting my 500-hour, hopefully in the next year. But as being on the other end of it is so funny because I feel like it wasn't even that long ago that I was in the training as a student, and I always think back to how you facilitated the training and I talked to the Montana about this, and I was like, I need to ask Stacey because I always think of you as like the most empathetic and understanding and kind person, but you also had these really firm boundaries that obviously you have to set when you run these programs. And I just always remember thinking like, how does she do that? Like she's making everyone feel seen and supported, but she's also like setting this tone that like she's in charge. And I'm not explaining it well, but it's
I
definitely a
think you are.
skill because we ran our first one and it was kind of like it was an interesting time, and yeah, we
It
were
was more
learning, and a
fluid.
lot of the people that came through were friends, and so it was kind of like an interesting dynamic, and I just always thought back to the way you and Jen and Darcy ran ours, which was just always like, you know, the rules were the rules, but also you guys were incredibly, you held a very safe space for us to all play within those boundaries, and it was just like a really, I don't know, seeing it from the other end, I really like it's a challenge, and you guys really just did it so seamlessly. I think that I mean, I just can't say enough good things about what you guys did for us, and how far we've all come and just seeing where everybody's at. It was like, because that was a weird one, and we were going through, and everyone's like, "Wow, we're virtual, and this is hard, and this is weird, and we're all trying our best." And I remember you saying so many times, "This will all make sense at some point. Like when you're teaching or in your future with this, you'll look back and you'll understand, the actual benefit that's coming from the way we have to do this right now." And I've thought of that, and it's so true because even the way we teach at Yoga 6 with the way we cue breath and transitions and the way we had to teach virtually, you have to be so much more detailed with what you're saying. And I was like, it really did. It all came together. It made sense in the end. And
Yay, I'm excited to hear
it,
that, right? Yeah,
yeah.
that's great.
I always say too, the teachers that got their 200-hour during 2020 are like the real deals because, if someone was going through that and then recognized like, oh, I don't want to necessarily like work in this way and kind of fell through the cracks, which is totally fine. To each their own. The ones that like stuck it out and got through it in such a uncertain way, an unfamiliar way, are like just rock star teachers now. And I think, May, you said you hit the nail on the head when you said, teaching virtually requires you to really to be clear and direct. And that's like the hardest part of going from a good teacher to a great teacher is your direction and your cues and making sure that you, like you've talked about, Stacey, making sure that you can speak to as many people as possible. So I will also say that, May, through your training with Stacey, May has coached me in how to, as a facilitator, create these clear boundaries. And what comes to mind is like, we're here to support you, but there's no room for bullshit. And so via your training, May has indirectly, or you have indirectly coached me as a facilitator through May on how to create a space like that. So it's just so cool how we're all interconnected. And like you said, we're all teachers.
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, I think there was a question, May, in your comments earlier too, and Montana just reflected it. And I don't think it's much different than what I try to do when I step into the studio to teach just a regular class, right? Like I think my job is to create a really safe but defined container for my students, and then allow them to feel the support that they need to find their way through it. And I honestly do not see a difference between teaching a class at 9:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning from teaching a teacher training session. I mean, that is what it is, I believe, in my experience, to show up and to guide with some guardrails, but to let people like have the room to move.
How did that evolve for you over the years? Because I know as a fresh new teacher coming into the world, you probably didn't always have those defined boundaries because that's something I feel like that come with experience and some lessons and some, effing around and finding out. So how did that develop for you? Like, did you always have firm boundaries in the way that you hold space, or was that like something that you developed over time?
I think like a happy accident. The first studio that I taught at, they were very clear that like we taught a certain series for the first year, no matter what. And so I was teaching a lot that first year, and I taught the same class exactly as laid out for an entire year. And I got really, really freaking good at giving that class. And what that gave me was the firm boundary to play with
Mhm.
it. And I still, that's how I approach my classes. I mean, though, now there's fluidity, there's experience, there's things that worked well and things that didn't work so well, and that knowledge comes in now too. I also was 27 when I started teaching. I'm 43 now. Like I've lived life outside of the studio as well, which also informs how we show up.
It's funny that you bring that up because in the teacher training we're facilitating, it's similar in the sense that there is an overall set sequence that over the course of the time that we're all together, the students learn. And then in their final, community class or their final practice teach, they're given the option to teach the set sequence, or if they want to come up with their own sequence, they can. But we really push and push and highly recommend that they teach the set sequence. Um, and this is something that you could speak to because you've done way more teacher trainings than we have. But what would you say to newer teachers coming into the teaching world, thinking that they need to teach the most creative, amazing, spectacular class that they've ever taught, that anyone's ever taught, versus becoming super, super confident teaching a sequence and then how they can build off of that later?
I'd say, yeah, I've been there. I wanted to like wow your socks off, which is
Of
great
course.
because you're already barefoot in a yoga studio. But like,
Yeah.
but like
Uh,
right, like for me, and I think this is shared by many of us, like we get certified and we have so much enthusiasm and we're so excited and we want to like show it all. Like I think the first yoga class I ever taught, like I played music, I read a Pema Chodron quote, I like talked the whole, do you know what I mean? With like everything inside of me, like just I threw it all out and it was overkill for people's nervous systems.
Yeah.
Right. Um, and so fine, that's where we start.
mhm.
Yep.
Because we got to start somewhere. But again, it was a happy accident that just where I kind of like, you know, started, that was the rule, that was the deal if I was going to teach there. And I, kind of pushed and I kind of want to be creative and whatever. It was the best thing to happen to my teaching. And it's the thing that I recommend to new teachers. And then they get to forge their own path, whether they take that recommendation or not. But it worked for me. I don't know if it would work for everyone, but um, I really like having a true control. I mean, there was a point where like I could have taught that sequence in my sleep, you know,
Mhm.
Yeah.
um, and to be uh, to have a mastery over a sequence that really works for a lot of people um, was something that created confidence um, in myself as a teacher, and then ultimately allowed me to become creative in a mindful way.
Mhm.
That's
I
the
think,
juice.
yeah, seriously. I think another thing for me, like the benefit of teaching a set sequence, even now still, is that as a teacher, it's kind of like my playground because I know what's happening like the back of my hand. And like you said, I could teach the set sequence that I teach in my sleep for sure. And so it's where I get to like play around with my language and my cues and all the other things that come along with being a yoga teacher outside of the sequence itself, that's where I get to explore. And, it feels almost like a science experiment when I teach that class. And when I notice that if there comes a time that I'm like, oh, I'm bored teaching the same thing, then it's like, oh, well, then I'm stagnating myself. Like there's so many other things to play around with this like grounded boundary. Let's figure out what else I can explore, essentially.
And it's like, I mean, is down dog gonna get old to me? No, like if I'm paying attention, if I'm in the moment, if I'm in this breath, if I feel my hands on my yoga mat right now, like this is a new experience, right? I never
Mhm.
get to step in the river in the same spot ever. And so
Ooh.
if I approach my teaching like that, the same way I approach my practice, gosh, it's a well that does not run out.
Such a good reminder.
It is a good reminder. And also, it's the same as being a new yoga student versus someone who's practiced for a really long time, or being a new yoga teacher versus someone who's taught for a long time. And I liked what you talked about with your first class where you're music and you're talking the whole time and you're excited and you created probably the best sequence ever. And then maybe you even talked all through Shavasana. And I remember talking all through Shavasana one time during training, and Ruth, she was my buddy, and afterwards she's like, the class was great. I do have one feedback. And I was like, what's that? She said, don't talk during Shavasana. She's like, I don't want to hear anything. And it was the best feedback I think I could have ever received in that moment, because it's something that I think about regularly now and I value so much. And when I'm laying there and someone's just, it's maybe someone's 4 to 5 minutes in their entire day where they have space. And so to take that is kind of like doing a disservice, to them, to yourself as the teacher in the space you're creating. But I I liked what you said about, no matter what the sequence is, you're never approaching your yoga mat the same way you were the day before. So every experience is new. It could be the same poses over and over and over again for months, for years, but the way you're arriving mentally, physically, energetically, your practice is going to feel different. And I think that as a person who's practiced yoga for a long time, and you're more aware of what's going on inside of you, that becomes more apparent. Just like when you're someone who's taught a little bit longer, you recognize the simplicity of teaching a sequence that might look a lot like the one you taught yesterday still holds a lot more value than, having to be the craziest, the most creative. And I've noticed, and you brought this up in training, you and Jen both, that as you practice, as you teach, your practice changes, your teaching changes, but the simplicity of it is what ends up ringing true to you as you become more seasoned in it all. And I find that to be really true, because I love good creative sequencing, but I also love that good, simple set sequence class that I know it's there, I know what it's going to feel like, or I know what it's felt like. And it is nice to explore my body and feel it differently on a day-to-day basis. So it's just very relevant to us right now as we're going through this training. And I want you to know how often, like, I think back on my time with you guys and like how much value it has to me. So I'm getting emotional.
Yeah, I love that because it just continues the chain because I do that with my teachers, right? And it's like I get to be part of this tapestry. You get to be part of this tapestry. Your students get to be part of this tapestry. And to me, that's like, I don't know, we need more things, in my opinion, that are connected in this world. So that feels
Mhm.
really
That's what comes up a lot. We always talk about yoga, what brings people back and the things, and pretty much all of the answers are, the connection of it all, and just, not even just the connection to your yoga mat, yourself, but to the community that is created within. But yeah, all of this has been such a great experience to hear how all of, even just the Pittsburgh people are so interconnected. And your teachers, are teachers that might know now. And it's nice to know that we're all kind of like in this little space together. And there's so much understanding within it all that we can all just like sit down and have these conversations. And we've all been in the same places and experienced the same types of things. And it's just like good to know you're never really alone with the craziness of it all.
So true. I'm just letting that simmer.
I can't let anything simmer. I'm emotional. I'm having a day.
Emotions are good, May.
Sometimes. My Aquarius moon hides emotions, is what I understand, until they just come bursting out of the seams. I don't even know they're there.
well, and then there they are. You can't ignore them. Right? They're gonna come out one way or another. Yeah. Yeah.
So true. So I guess I have a question that's kind of not off topic, it's yoga, but can you tell, if you can remember, if you can think of it, maybe not of all time, but the first one that comes to mind, can you tell us about like the moment, or I'm trying to steer clear of saying like your favorite yoga class you've ever taken, but instead like, can you tell us about a time where you were taking a class and you were like, and you realized in that moment, like, wow, this is it, or like this feels really good, or I really, really love this and doing this.
I mean, I think I touched on it that first class
Yeah.
at the gym with Darcy. I mean, it opened a world of yoga to me that like I had practiced some different styles by that point, and had teachers that I really liked, but I had never done what we would consider, a power yoga or like a true um, uh, like power vinyasa type style. And it just it just blew the doors off what yoga could be for me,
Mhm.
and really matched where I was energetically at that moment in my life. So that's the one that just stands out.
Yeah. That's
I
that's
don't go up to
amazing.
most people and say we need to be friends, right? Like
See,
like the result of it too was like there was like a force behind it, and it really did like not just my career set it in a different direction, but my life.
yeah, it's so cool. I love when people can remember that class, that moment when it was just like, this is exactly what you said. And Darcy has that effect on people. I feel like she really does. She's just so in her own like grounded in her own footing, that, you know, that sort of authenticity and passion is just attractive, and it's obvious and there's no denying it. So we brought up Darcy a lot today, and like May said, she's come up on the podcast quite a few times. So um yeah, I would love to have her on one day. I'm sure we
What was
will.
funny is when I took Darcy's class for the first time, half of me was like, what the fuck is happening? What is this? I've never experienced anything like this. I'm dying. I don't know if my body's going to make it. And then at the end I was like, I'm in. I'm coming back. I'm signing up. I'm doing this again. And I think that was the thing, is just, energetically at the time it's what matched, what I needed. And it was as challenging as it was relaxing, and it just had that really perfect mix of like I was dying, and then at the end I felt this real blissful like inner peace. And it was and also because she cursed in class, and that just made me feel comfortable because I grew up in a really loud, aggressively Italian family that cursed a lot. So like someone fell over and she was like, get your shit together, and I was like, oh mom, you're here. So it just had, I know that not everybody likes to hear a good curse word in yoga class, but in that moment I needed to hear it, and it felt like home.
Another thing that I just thought of while we were talking about Darcy is, I don't know if you know this, Stacey. I used to be a part of your work trade program.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I honestly forgot until just now, because I was like, oh, I used to take Darcy's class. It was the noon on Fridays, and I would go all the time. And I was like, I wonder what. And then I was like, oh my God, I used to clean your studio so I could take class for free.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, and what I loved about her class, specifically what I remember loving, is that I having a dance background, it took a lot for a teacher to humble me, because and now I know how I could I determined that as a student, but when I first started practicing, I thought that it was up to the teacher, and Darcy was really, really good at humbling me. So that's why I was like, yeah, I want you to kick my ass, please. Make me do things that are really challenging for me. So while at the same time, there would be, someone next to me who was 30, 40 years older than me, also having an amazing time in a very different way. And that was, I think Darcy was the first teacher that I had that did a really impeccable job of teaching to multiple different, like big bunny ear, like, levels and abilities within the space, and giving each and every person something to a place to land, no matter where that was. And I really appreciated that about her. I'm sure I still would. I would love to take her class again.
Stacey, you were the first person, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were the first person to bring a pay what you can class to Pittsburgh. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if I was the first to Pittsburgh, but it was the first that I was aware of, that
Okay.
at least in a community space. I could be wrong though, but yeah, it was in 2007 at the Union Project, and that was
Yeah.
really cool. I wasn't quite done with my 200 hour yet, and I walked in, and a woman that would become my friend was running the Union Project, and I said, "Well, I want to bring a yoga class here," and she's like, "Well, we don't do that." I said, "I know, that's why I'm here." I know. And like I look back at that, I'm like, whoa, like that is something that like I don't know what gave me the confidence to do that. But it was so great, and the community of people that I met there are just, I mean, literally some of the people in that first like year or two are like just incredible artists in the city, like social justice workers, like just like when I look around at like the people that were in that room together, I look around and I'm like, wow, like I had no idea. We were all young, at the time. And now we're off doing many different things. But it just felt like the right place uh, to start the way I wanted to share yoga on my own and figure out. I love teaching at studios and was so grateful for those opportunities. But I really wanted to figure out what it was to start a project or program and share yoga in the way that like felt authentic to that moment in my life.
Mhm.
Yeah. And if I remember correctly, we had like a little tiny write-up in Yoga Journal. It was like Pittsburgh, PA, pay
Cool.
what you can class.
There you
That's
go.
awesome.
Maybe you were the first.
Yeah.
I don't
Going
know if we were the first, but certainly
to your
weren't the first
knowledge.
ever. I mean, Brian Kest in Santa Monica in California was the person who, in my understanding, really started doing the pay what you can classes in Vinyasa that I was aware of. And
Mhm.
that's kind of what gave me the idea. I'm like, well, Pittsburgh needs this too. So I have to credit him.
Everywhere does. Everywhere needs more yoga with more affordability so everybody could start practicing. And that's why we started this podcast. We want to just like literally lobby people into doing yoga. We want to
Yeah.
convince everybody. We want to interview people and just convince the world that they need to start doing this because
They
I
do.
get done with a yoga
Montana and
practice,
my
like
life.
whether it's 10 minutes or like a full practice or something, like when I actually get to take someone else's class, right? Like I get done and I always look around, I'm like, yoga, do people know about this?
Yeah.
You know, like because I forget. And it's,
Yeah.
what I do for a living, and sometimes I forget like how um, you know, transformative it can be
Mhm.
for the individual and then, maybe even for the collective.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Speaking of being a practitioner yourself, because we talk about this a lot too, you've taught for years, you're a studio owner. How has that affected your own personal practice? I mean, obviously there's ebbs and it flows, but how do you, like you said, when you finally get to take a class, it's like such a luxury when you're just the student and you're not thinking about it in any other way than just I'm here and I'm doing it. But how do you make it a priority to try to still get to your mat as a student?
I make movement a priority every day. I have a little reminder that comes up on my phone, and oftentimes that's either time on my mat, usually in my basement studio here at the house, um, or walking. I love walking. I'm also a backpacker as well. But I mean, every day I try to do some sort of movement based on, where I'm at energetically, what I'm able to do. So usually that looks like walking and or yoga every day. I just rented a cabin up at Moraine this past weekend, and I had my mat out, and it was before the sun rose, and I was like practicing in front of the big windows there, and like literally like the sun started coming up, and it's this lakefront cabin, and then like the lake revealed herself to me as I was practicing, and I was just like, okay, not every practice is this, but when I get these moments, like,
Soak it in.
whoa.
That makes me like want to cry.
Me too. It's like my idea of heaven. It literally
Yes.
is my idea of heaven.
Yeah,
Just
I
painted that
really had a
picture.
moment. I was like, I was there by myself that morning, and I was like, does anyone like know about
That's amazing.
but I also, I mean, and that's the cool thing about yoga. What a luxury. Like that is a gift and not my everyday life by any means. But I also can get that on my mat. I also can get that in my car when I park and I'm losing it and I can take a breath. It's like it can look a lot of different ways. And the more I tap into it, the more I can tap into it.
Yeah.
After taking your accessible yoga training, because I'm familiar with him, and he's a big advocate of your yoga practice isn't just on your mat. It's not just the asana. So I like that you mentioned walking. I walk every day, and sometimes I think popping in my headphones and going for a walk in my brain has just as much of a benefit, maybe some days even more than my yoga practice. It's like how I center myself, and that's always a really good reminder that we're sitting here talking about yoga in terms of going into a studio and getting on your yoga mat or something like that, but also the yoga is all the things. The yoga is sitting in your car for that extra 5 minutes before you walk in the door at home, and just like either letting your letting it out or breathing it through or something. But um it's a good reminder that the yoga is all the things.
Mhm.
It's not
The
just buying a
yoga is
yoga
the
mat.
thing that is between me and the outside thing that's happening and my reaction, right? It's the pause. The yoga's the pause. The yoga's
Mhm.
right. Like, um, it's all those things. And I don't know. This just seems relevant to share right now. I've been thinking a lot about like what yoga is, like if I had to define it. And if I think about mat practice, like asana practice, I've been thinking so much about how these poses are like little things to practice breathing through, like situations, right? So like sometimes they're joy situations, and sometimes they're stress situations, and sometimes they're like in the middle, but like each shape that we create on our mat, we get to practice breathing through. And so like, what am I practicing for? Oh, my freaking life.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I don't know. I guess in that way too, it's like it doesn't matter how much time or what it looks like, but when I'm consciously breathing through a thing, whether it's on my yoga mat or in a stress situation in my life, like I'm doing yoga.
It's practice.
Mhm.
You're practicing yoga.
Mhm.
We talked to one of Montana's mentors yesterday, and she said almost the same exact thing, is
Yeah.
that the asana is like it's almost like a simulated challenge. You're simulating this challenging thing that you're working through with your breath. You're listening to the voices in your head. You're understanding how your internal landscape responds to a challenge. And it's something that you're volunteering for and you're setting yourself up for, and that in is preparing you for those unexpected challenges or those, uncomfortable moments that just pop into your day without any warning. And, if you're simulating those challenges and learning how to work through them, then the ones that come up unexpectedly, you're going to be able to take that pause. You're going to be able to respond a little bit differently. I think it's funny, 2 days in a row, two people that we consider our big teachers in yoga said the same things.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
for a, a number of years, I always thought of it like, and I said in my classes, like these poses are stress situations, but it's been the last like year, which is interesting, that I'm like, these are also sometimes joy situations. Like
Yeah.
I like actually like there is elation on my mat. There is, there are like these beautiful moments that I get to practice breathing through on my mat too. So I've tried to expand that for myself, because it isn't, my practice isn't just a stress situation, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Just like my life isn't just a stress situation, right?
Yep.
So I like to, it's been important for me to bring that element into. Um, and I recently like started doing the ecstatic dance Pittsburgh stuff, and like I
Cool.
float a lot, and like all of these things, like float tank, just to, for anyone
Mm-hmm.
who's not sure what that is. Um, like there's all these like ways that both my movement and my stillness practice is expanding off the mat, but to me, I would call that all yoga.
Big
Totally.
time.
Yeah. I love that you brought in the the joyous parts as well, because, or the still, or whatever emotion shows up, because that's that's like the differentiation, right? And a reminder to, like, you have the capability of feeling grounded and present through every emotion. And why would we not want to practice feeling grounded and present through the good stuff? Duh.
I want to be
Like,
here for that too. Please sign me
yeah.
up.
Yeah, like let me feel that joy. Let me feel that goodness. I know that we're almost up on time, but I would love to hear about, so from opening up a studio, South Hills Power Yoga, what it's like to not only love this practice as a student and then offer this practice as a teacher, but then put like a business label, or layer rather, on top of it as well. Like, what's it like to own a business that is rooted in your passion and lifestyle, essentially?
Um, I I often like think about, if you would have told me, I mean, we'll be celebrating 13 years in
Congrats.
of the studio. And if you would have told me like 14 years ago that I'd still be doing anything this long, right? I would have been like, no, not me. And I also like, um, I really love that I get to do something that I love every day. I mean, there's aspects of it that aren't, like there's some admin stuff that I'm like, you know, but every time I step into the studio to teach, I remember why I do the other pieces. And I feel very, I consider us a neighborhood studio. I get to
Mhm.
teach my neighbors. I get to teach in the community where I live. I get to walk to work most days. And so I feel really grateful for those things. And when the like real limitations or pressures of running a business like come into play, like I've also like managed other people's businesses. Like I managed a TGI Fridays once, and like that was good information and good experience, but like this feels better to me than burgers and fries, like
Yeah.
um and so not that that isn't important too, but like I just feel real, there's a lot of ways that I could make a living. I just feel really lucky that I get to do it this way right now.
We feel
It
lucky
it
too.
shines. Yeah.
I'm lucky. We're all lucky that you run your business this way because half of Pittsburgh is talking about how South Hills Power brought them yoga. So,
Mhm.
in terms of, your success as a business owner and bringing yoga to the world and sharing this practice that you think has transformed your life so much, you have. You've done it to a lot of people, and a lot of people have had their lives transformed by the practice as well. So, it's cool to start from that level of teaching a class to a little gym and then opening up a space that has created other teachers that are all now creating and sharing, and it's kind of like you've had a billion children that are all, off in the world doing things that they learned from you. It's kind of cool.
It's cool. And like it again, it's just a continuation of like what my teachers have taught me. And so I guess I love just being part of that chain, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, like you've left an imprint that in a positive way on so many people, and that's like a cool thing to look back on and know how successful you were in that.
Cool. And what's great about it is that like there's an entry point, I think, for everyone when we're talking about breath. Like if this really is a breath practice, there's a way that we can share it both formally inside of a yoga studio or a classroom, but also just in our beingness and interactions with others. And I'm really curious about that moving forward.
This was a fun parenting win the other day, but Maya, our daughter, she's I'm anxious, Ed's anxious. We come from anxious families, so our daughter obviously is an anxious kid. And I've been able to teach her some breathing exercises, and she's done some yin yoga with me at night, to help us get sleepy. And the other day, her Apple Watch went off, and a friend texted her, and she said, "Maya, I'm freaking out. Can you teach me that breathing exercise again?" And I was like, "You're doing it. You're helping. You're teaching other people how not to freak out." And I was like, "That I've done something well. I can stamp that on my parenting, resume that I've taught my child how to make others learn how to breathe to calm themselves down." And I was like, I've literally never been prouder of anything in my entire life.
That's
Yeah, and
amazing.
what great thing like instilling these healthy habits to move through stress.
Mhm.
Um, it gives me hope.
Yeah.
I It made me so grateful, and it gave me so much hope just in general that like these really it seems so small. Like any parent can teach their kid how to take a deep breath, and but my parents didn't teach me that. Not that because they weren't good parents,
They
but just
didn't
because
have
they
that
didn't
tool,
know.
right? My
Right.
parents didn't have that tool. Yeah.
Exactly. So it just kind of it's such a simple thing that more of us are learning it ourselves, and so more of us are going to teach our kids how to do it, and then all of our kids are going to know how to do it, and they're going to teach their kids how to do it. So it is just that like just that idea of the passing down of these tiny little healthy things that are just going to eventually make, everybody feel just like that little bit better. Which brings
Absolutely.
us
Our
to our
very
last
last
question.
question, which you've answered eloquently already multiple times, but we're going to ask
Yeah.
you again more specifically. Do you think yoga can change the world? Yes or no, and why?
I think it can change on the individual level, right? That's the only thing I have like even the hope of power over, right? But I do believe that like there's a ripple effect to that. And so um, yes, I believe that these tools, um, I want to be able to share them in lots of different ways. So each person has the opportunity to integrate them into their lives. So my answer is yes, and it makes me see the work that I want to do and have left to do. So,
Mm-hmm. Your answer brings me back to the tapestry imagery that you brought up before. It's like we're all a part of it, and be doing the work on ourselves individually, like you said, helps to continue along the lines of this tapestry that has yoga woven within it as the common thread. So that's the juice, as we say.
and I think yoga to me is awareness, and
Mhm.
awareness to me is the key to like getting me out of self and into other, right? Caring about other, and that is what, in my opinion, the world needs more of.
100% agreed.
Yes.
I'm
All right.
so
Well, we're at time. So Stacey, thank you so much for your time. This conversation
seriously,
was, yeah, just so
I'm so
special.
happy
We're
that you
so
came on.
lucky to have you in the Pittsburgh community. And I need to come take your class because I did take your class one time years ago. I don't even know. It was one of the late ones where then you did like a meditation or something at the end. There was like a class and then a Nidra. Was it that? I don't know. It was a long, long time ago.
Possibly, I don't know. It
You're like,
slipped
I
a
don't
lot of
know
ways,
either.
but I'd love to do a class swap with you. So maybe we can do a field trip both ways.
Yes,
That'd be
that
fun.
would be so fun. May and I will plan it, and we'll roll out our mats and be
Let's bring
students
all
because
of our
there's nothing
yoga
better.
teacher trainees to Stacy's class, and we'll be like,
That's a
"This is
great
May's yoga
idea.
godmother.
Would love
Let's
to
all
have.
learn from her
Love
That
to
is
have.
from
a
the sports."
great idea. And then they'll feel less sad that we gave them restorative yoga last Sunday instead of power. We're like, here's your power class. Stacy's going to teach it instead of us because we're too tired tonight.
That's okay. When you're running the training, you get to teach a restorative class.
Yes.
Bingo.
All
I
right. Well,
thought
thank you so much for your time. This has just been such a treat, such an honor.
agreed.
And I can't wait to share it with all of our listeners.
Thank you for the invite. This was so much fun. And
Yay.
Thank you so
let's keep
much.
sharing this thing, right? Pass it on.
Amen.
We
Amen.
are that's the plan.
Yes. All right, guys. Have a lovely afternoon. I'll see you both soon.
Thanks. Thank you.
Bye, Stacy. Thanks again.